Writers Read by LiTracey. Getting that book in children's hands.
Hi, I'm Tracey Grice and welcome to the Writers Read podcast. I'm a teacher and I'm really passionate about getting kids reading. The inspiration for this podcast came from a quote by American author Nancy Atwell, and she says, "For students of every ability and background, it's the simple, miraculous act of reading a good book that turns them into readers. Because even for the least experienced, most reluctant reader, it's the one good book that changes everything. The job of adults who care about reading is to move heaven and earth to put that book into a child's hands." So this podcast is designed to do just that. It's not only a podcast that can help children and adolescents connect with authors and books, it's also a resource for parents, teachers, and librarians who are helping kids on their reading journey. On this episode of the Writers Read podcast, I'm chatting with Jack Heath. Jack is an award-winning author, a member of the Australian Capital Territory Writers Centre, the Children's Book Council of Australia, and the Australian Crime Writers Association. He's also an ambassador for the ACT Chief Minister's Reading Challenge. I love chatting with Jack, and he gave us lots of advice for young readers, including this.
I think there's nothing wrong with kind of reading just the first chapter and then deciding this isn't for me, or sometimes this isn't for me yet and putting it down.
Also, on this episode of the Writers Read podcast, we hear from our resident reviewer Rebecca, who will share her thoughts about some of Jack's other books. Most of you will know Jack for his gripping thrillers. In fact, he's written over 30 of them. I found out that his novels have been translated into 6 languages and also adapted for film. You might also be interested to know that through the course of his writing journey, he's toured morgues and prisons, performed as a magician, and travelled through 11 countries. If you're a gamer, another fun fact about Jack is that you might have heard his voice in the popular mobile game Rodeo Stampede. Jack, one of the great things I love about doing this podcast is that I get to meet great authors like yourself, and there's a real joy in hearing an author read one of their own books aloud. So what have you got for us today?
Today I've got book 1 of the Liars series. So the first book's called The Truth App. This is a series about a kid who invents a lie detector app and releases it for free over the internet so as people can help him test it. And then he becomes public enemy number 1 because no one likes their lies being called out. So I'd like to read you just a little bit of chapter 1. There was no warning at all, just a flicker in the corner of Charlie's eye. He turned his head just in time to see the brown ute roaring towards Dad's side of the car. Charlie opened his mouth to scream. Smash! The impact threw him sideways. The seatbelt jerked tight across his chest, crushing his ribs. He couldn't get any air into his lungs. Half the car crumpled inwards towards Dad, who had let go of the steering wheel and thrown his arms up to protect his face. Dad! The screech of tearing metal drowned out Charlie's voice. The sound burned through his eardrums and sank deep into his skull. The windows dissolved into tiny cubes of shatterproof glass which filled the air like hail, stinging his cheeks. He squeezed his eyes shut. A few moments later, everything was still. The echoes of screeching tyres died away. The smell of melted rubber scorched the back of Charlie's throat. The ute started to reverse, taking Dad's door with it. The window frame was tangled around the ute's chrome bull bar. The hinges screeched and snapped, leaving the driver's side of the car ripped open. The ute's headlights shone only a metre or 2 from where Charlie was slumped. They seemed as bright as twin suns. Even with his eyes closed, the light left Charlie dazzled and confused. The ute's engine whined as it backed away. "Dad?" Charlie croaked. He could barely hear his own voice over the ringing in his ears. Dad turned his head like it weighed a ton. His skin was shiny with sweat and his curly hair flopped and stuck to his forehead. Dad asked something. "What?" Charlie wiggled his jaw, trying to fix his ears. "You okay?" Dad said again. Charlie nodded, sending a jab of pain up his neck. "I think I'm all right. Are you—" Vroom! An engine snarled. Charlie looked over and saw the brown ute zooming towards the car again. He got a split-second view of the driver, an old man with thick black glasses and a baseball cap, gloved hands gripping the steering wheel. Suddenly Charlie realised the crash was not an accident. The old man in the ute was attacking them. "Watch out!" Charlie screamed. Dad had seen it too. He slammed his foot down on the accelerator. The wrecked car lurched forwards, bent wheels grinding. Too slow. The speeding ute smashed into the rear corner of the car, sending it into a spin. The world outside the windows rushed past. The neon vacancy sign outside Kelton's motel flew across Charlie's field of view twice. He felt like he might throw up. Clang! The car hit a streetlight and stopped spinning. Charlie slumped back into his chair, too dizzy to move. The streetlight leaned over and then paused, as though deciding whether to fall. It didn't, but the bulb dropped out of it and shattered against the road like a water bomb. The street was plunged into darkness. Charlie fumbled with his seatbelt, hands shaking. He stabbed the orange button with his thumb until the buckle popped out. Then he shoved the door open and tumbled out onto the road. "He's trying to kill us!" he cried, scrambling to his feet. "Run!" Dizzy and sore, Charlie ran on wobbling legs past the dead streetlight, past the motel with its darkened windows, past the litter bins, and then he realised Dad wasn't with him. He turned to look back. The wrecked car was deep in shadow, but Charlie could see Dad's outline. He was slumped in the driver's seat. The second impact had knocked him out, or worse. Heart pounding, Charlie looked around for help. He couldn't see anyone. No police, no other vehicles, no pedestrians. Another quiet night in Kelton. But he could hear the Utes motor idling somewhere in the gloom, headlights off. The old man would ram them again at any moment, and Dad was a sitting duck. Charlie sprinted back to the car. As he got closer, he saw that an airbag had exploded out of the steering wheel. Dad's face was buried in the white fabric. "Dad!" Charlie screamed. "Wake up!" He grabbed his father's shoulders and pulled him backwards, leaving a smudge of blood on the airbag. There was a deep cut across the bridge of his nose, and his cheekbone had turned a mottled purple. His eyes were closed. Tyres crunched. An engine grumbled. The Ute was coming back. Frantic, Charlie reached over and unbuckled Dad's seatbelt to drag him out of the car. But Charlie was still dizzy, and Dad was too heavy. Charlie fell back, and Dad landed on him, crushing Charlie's legs against the road. Headlights swept across them. The Ute was back. Charlie tried to push Dad off and roll him under the car where he might be safe. But Dad was like a bag of bricks. Charlie couldn't move him. He braced himself as the headlights got closer. That's chapter 1. I'll leave it at that.
Fantastic. Well, readers, you know what you need to do if you want to find out what happens next.
Rebecca recommends.
We heard Jack read from his new book, Liars. It is great. I read it in 2 nights. But it's 2 other books I'll be talking about today. So with many series to choose from, I'm spoilt for choice with Jack Heath. Now, Jack Heath has written 3 books in the Minutes of Danger series. There's 300, 400 and 500 Minutes of Danger. And each book is a collection of short stories, all told in real time, so that the time that it takes to read each story is the same amount of time as the action takes place in each story. These fast-paced, real-time stories are great for those readers who struggle to keep up with what's going on in a novel. You don't have to remember who did what when, how is this character related to that character, and what happened again in chapter 1. But, in saying that, the beauty of these stories is that if you are a more astute reader, you will soon realise that while all of these short stories stand on their own, they are actually linked together in some way. I remember that when I read the 300 Minutes of Danger book, I was partway through one of the stories when I thought, hang on a minute, what just happened in this story is what caused that to happen in a story that I've already read. So it's not essential to the enjoyment of the books, whether the reader makes these connections or not, and that's the beauty of them. They cater for all kinds of readers. So 500 Minutes of Danger is the most recent book. And in the first story, we have Ella, and her Uncle Ray has been missing for 4 days. Now, he's headed out to find out more about some bones of a giant creature that have recently been discovered. No one but Ella seems to be worried about his absence, so it is she that decides to head out into the woods to find him. The book is called 500 Minutes of Danger, so you can be assured that she's not going to have an easy, pleasant jaunt. No, she finds herself trapped in quicksand. And as I mentioned, these stories are told in real time. So as a reader, you're experiencing the same panic that Ella is feeling as she finds herself being sucked into the sand and all of the thoughts that are going through her head, thinking of anything that she has ever heard about quicksand and how she might escape. Then there's a story about students on an excursion who get trapped in a gift shop to avoid an unheard of shower of acid rain. And another about a boy who gets trapped in an MRI machine when part of the hospital collapses. And another about a family fleeing to their doomsday bunker because a monster is destroying the city. And as you make your way through these stories, you start to put together all of the clues and puzzle pieces to see how the stories are linked together. Then in the 7th story, The Spy Returns, it's set in Antarctica, and Kelsey has been sent on a mission to infiltrate a top-secret base. She is a student at SPII, SPY, School for Pupils of International Intelligence. Her job is to find the off switch for the creature, There's this creature again, the one we keep reading about. She finds the secret room, which everyone assumed was the control centre. She expected to see technicians, screens and controls. What she finds is a man in a room with no shoes and a hood over his head. This man is Ray, the uncle that Ella was supposed to be meeting in the first story. What is he doing here, and what does he have to do with the creature that everyone is talking about? There were only ever 4 books in the Scream series, and sadly some of them are no longer available to buy, but you should be able to find them in your library. One that still is in print is the first book in the series, called The Human Flytrap. Now, one of the things that I always say when I talk to kids about books is that it's okay to pick up a book because you like the look of the cover. After all, that is the cover's only job, to make you want to pick it up. Well, this book goes one step further. Not only does it look cool and scary, it has a warning on the front cover. This book will scream. And it does. It screams when you open the cover. Are you ready? This is very cool, but it is also challenging when you're actually reading the book, because every time you turn the page, this is what happens. So after figuring out how to read it without it driving me crazy, here is what I thought of the book. Human Flytrap. Now, Josh lives in a town called Axe Falls. The name says it all, really. Nothing good can happen from a town called Axe Falls, a town of mysterious disappearances, terrifying visions and unusual events. Josh and his family move from their perfectly nice house to a perfectly creepy house. Peeling paint, cobwebbed windows, rotting fence posts, and in the bathroom, Josh finds crime scene tape, DNA swabs and evidence bags. What has happened in this house? Then there's the weird neighbour, mysterious scratching and a severed head that appears at Josh's window, disappearing when his mum comes into the room. But the creepiness isn't limited to the house. As the title of the book suggests, Venus flytraps play a big part in this story, and Josh's science class are doing an experiment with Venus flytraps to see how much they can eat. When Josh's friend Ben is accused of cheating, because his plant is different than the others, bigger and hungrier, they decide to do a bit of exploring to prove that he was given a different type of plant. Not only does Josh find out that yes, these plants do walk, but when he finds them in the bush, they are much bigger, much more frightening than he could have imagined, and they are eating more than just flies. There's even a giant one in his backyard, and it may or may not have something to do with the terrible thing that happened in the house. It may or may not have something to do with his friend Lily's missing dad. Now, at least once a week, I get asked for a scary book, and I think these Scream books fit that criteria. Funnily enough, though, it wasn't the giant man-eating Venus flytraps in the story that I found scary. The most creepy scenes for me were the ones where Josh was sure that there was someone else in the house with him, like this part where Josh wakes up in the middle of the night and he hears someone in his room. Creak. There it was again. The floorboards in his room were shifting, bending under the weight of something. The rest of the house was silent. Josh could smell torn cardboard and faintly wet dirt. It's nothing, he told himself. Probably just the house settling. But his heart was racing. His mouth was dry and he couldn't bring himself to swallow. He was too scared to make any kind of movement. Creak! Closer this time. He wasn't imagining it. There was something in his room, moving closer and closer to his bed. Was it the old woman reaching out to him with crooked fingers? Or could it be a headless ghost looking for the rest of itself? It's just a nightmare, Josh thought. Any second now, I'll wake up. But his eyes were adjusting to the dim light, and suddenly he could see a shape. Someone lurching towards his bed. A man's silhouette with huge shoulders and long arms. Josh was paralysed with terror. If he yelled for help, the shadow man would know that he was awake. If he switched on the light, he would be able to see the intruder, but the intruder would also see him. If he stayed still, he'd be grabbed. But there was nowhere to go. The bed was flush against the wall. Rolling out meant moving towards the man. And now he was out of time. This series would be great for anyone that's probably 10 plus that wants a fast-paced read that is a little bit scary.
Hi, I'm Jack Heath and you're listening to the Writers Read podcast.
Before meeting Jack, I already knew he was an avid reader, so I was really excited to get more of an insight into his reading life. And I hope you enjoy our chat. Jack, you're here in Adelaide for Meet the Writers, so
Yes.
We're going to be learning about you as a writer today. But this podcast is all about your life as a reader. I was wondering, have books and reading always been a part of your life?
I don't remember a time when I wasn't a big reader. I think pretty much as soon as I was old enough to read to myself, I was doing it more or less constantly. I was one of those kids who had to be told it was rude to bring a book to the dinner table, or on long car trips. There were a fair few in my childhood because I grew up mostly in Canberra, though a little bit in Melbourne, and my grandparents lived in Shepparton. So that's a 6-hour drive, Canberra to Shepparton. And we used to do it quite a lot. And I could read in the car without getting car sick, whereas my brother couldn't. So it was mostly my brother being bored and fidgety while I had my nose buried in a book rather than obligingly entertaining him. But in year 5 in particular, I got a bit sick. I had pretty nasty ear infections for most of that year, and I missed a lot of school. And I think I could have ended up quite academically behind, except that I had this wonderful teacher librarian at that school who, whenever I was well enough to come in, she would handpick a book for me to take home. And when I wasn't well enough to come in, often she would take books and give them to friends of mine to take over to my house, which she probably wasn't supposed to do, but I really appreciated it. So yeah, it's always been a big part of my life.
So obviously you've been surrounded by books, you love reading. Was there a book that really changed your life in some way?
There have been lots and lots, but one of the ones that I remember was a book by Emily Rodda called The Ghost of Raven Hill, which was the first book of the Teen Power Inc. series, which was later rebranded as the Raven Hill Mysteries. So I remember loving ghost stories as a kid. I was really into ghosts and skeletons and, ghouls and all that stuff. And then I saw in the Scholastic book catalogue The Ghost of Raven Hill, and I went, "Ooh, that's got a ghost in it. I want it." And spoiler warning, there's no ghost. It was more of a sort of Scooby-Doo type mystery. Sure. But that was the moment where I discovered mystery novels. So it was a genre that I'd never seen before. And now I think pretty much all the novels that I write are mystery novels on one level or another. There are other influences in there too. But I have to say that book unexpectedly pushed me out of my comfort zone. So that's the first one that springs to mind. Okay.
What I find with my own students is that they do develop a relationship with an author or a genre or a series. And so it seems mystery was one of those ones that you unexpectedly came your way and you really enjoyed it. Are there other, from there, did you continue to just read in that genre, or were there other genres that you sort of dipped in and out of?
So as a kid, I was a lot like your students in that I'd just read basically the one thing over and over until I found something that I didn't like, and then I'd switch to something else. So not just the one genre, but the one series until either I finish the series and have to start something new, or I find something in that series that's a bit boring and then I switch to a new author. I try not to do that anymore. These days, my sort of rule that I set for myself is that I try to only read one thing per author, because the reason is I'm trying to discover as many different authors and writing styles as I can. But the result of that is that I read a lot of things that I don't like. So whereas as a kid, I feel like I had kind of a 90-95% hit rate in terms of the books that I picked for myself. Sure. Yep. So I know there's always an ongoing argument between, if kids are reading something that's fun but might not be good for them, should we make them sort of eat their vegetables and read something that's likely to be better for them? But I tend to fall onto the fun side of that debate, because I think reading is in itself good for you. So I don't think you need to be reading something that's considered worthwhile literature. I think if you're enjoying yourself and you're reading, then that's enough.
Absolutely, and that's really something that I feel that I battle with almost every day, where I might have a teacher or a parent say, my child keeps reading in this same series, and I want them to read something with a little bit more rigour, and I feel that I just get excited when children want to read, because it's not the same for your own experience growing up. You loved reading, you were surrounded by books. It's not the same for all children, and I always get excited when a child finds a book and they want to read it.
Yeah.
And I find that that's the moment that launches their life as a reader, and it's our job as the proficient adult readers in their life to help them build that reading ladder that says, well, if you like this, then you might like this. So what advice would you give to young readers who find that they are, reading within a series or within a, perhaps a particular author to step out and try something different?
I think one of the things that I heard when I was a kid, and this came from one of my teachers or something like that, but she had a rule which was you take 100 and then minus your age, and that's how many pages of something you should read before you give up on it. Or rather, after that number, you're allowed to give up on it. That's okay. So if you're 100 years old, you can judge a book by its cover. But if you're 10, then read the first 90 pages. I think that's probably a little bit extreme. I think there's nothing wrong with kind of reading just the first chapter and then deciding this isn't for me, or sometimes this isn't for me yet, and putting it down. Yeah. So the answer really is libraries. Like if you love an author and you love a series, then that's great. Go nuts with it. But also, if you just go to the library and browse along the shelves and just look for titles that interest you, and if you read the first page of something and you don't like it, no problem, put it down, pick up something else, and eventually you'll find something that suits you. I'm not convinced there is such a thing as objective quality. It's more like it's almost like a dating service, sort of matchmaking between book and reader. So just because something speaks to you and someone else doesn't like it, that doesn't mean it isn't good. And just because you don't like something, that doesn't mean it isn't good either. It's just a matter of finding that fit.
Absolutely. In terms of habits as a reader, it's one thing that I love to explore with children, because they find it fascinating when they hear that I've tried a book and I've abandoned it for whatever reason, or that I get distracted by other things in my life that take me away from my reading, because I think they have this view of a good reader as being someone, who reads big books, thick books, lexically dense books. I find that giving them a window into the reading life of an adult actually gives them a sense of relief when they go, oh, okay, you don't always finish a book, or you do abandon a book.
Yeah.
When you think about your own life as a reader, what would you say some of your strengths are, or your good habits as a reader?
I used to be one of those readers who would always finish something even if I didn't like it. And I considered this a strength of mine until I realized that was changing the kinds of books I was willing to pick up in the first place. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I wouldn't read anything that was thicker than, 400 pages, because I'd look at it on the shelf and go, well, if I don't like that, then that's months of my life gone. Yep. Whereas if it's something nice and short, I would gravitate towards those. So I don't do that anymore. But I think one of my strengths as a reader now, so I am willing to give up on things halfway through, but also I read fairly. I always look for things to enjoy in the books that I'm reading. Mm-hmm. So probably my greatest strength as a reader is the fact that when I'm reading something, I'm never looking for things to object to or things to hate. I'm only looking at things the writer did well, and trying to work out how I can emulate that and steal those ideas for my own work.
So reading like a writer.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. What about things that get in the way of your reading life? Do you find that you get sort of distracted, or you go through periods of time when you're not reading for one reason or another?
Yeah, sometimes it's funny because I think there's a difference between the things that we actually enjoy doing and the things that we are compelled to do. Mm-hmm. So even compelled, by ourselves, there's no external force. But for example, I enjoy reading books more than I enjoy being on Twitter, but I spend a ton of time on Twitter, and that doesn't make any sense except that it's designed to be addictive. There's those notifications that tell you, oh, someone has liked this thing that you did, or someone is responding to something that you've said, or something like that. Whereas a book isn't like that. A book is, the things that are written on the pages of a book are much, much more well thought through and entertaining than the things on Twitter, but it doesn't actually respond to you in that same way. So I do get easily distracted by other things. the solution I found to that problem is to give myself permission to read things that I enjoy. So, for example, just recently, I forget what book I was reading, but I wasn't enjoying it very much. So I kept switching to TV, Twitter, Facebook, other things. But when I abandoned that book and started reading Depends What You Mean by Extremist by John Safran, which was an unexpected page turner for me, and I couldn't put it down, my internet habits got better. So yeah, just give yourself permission to read things you enjoy, and that tends to help you make the time.
One of the things my students love to hear is about where people read, and we have this sort of growing list of unusual places we find ourselves reading. For children it might be up a tree or under the bed, or some people have a favourite reading chair. Do you have a spot that is your, obviously as growing up you read in all kinds of places, but do you have a designated reading spot these days?
These days I mostly read in bed, although when I read on the couch, that always feels like a special treat, taking some time out of my day. But actually the reading experiences that I have enjoyed the most, I think, tend to be on aeroplanes. And I spend a lot of time on aeroplanes because of my job. But I think the main reason is that, it's like phone's on flight mode. There's nothing else to do. Sure. And rather than there being nothing else to do being a burden, that actually gives me the freedom to focus on what I'm doing without that lingering voice at the back of my head that says, oh, maybe you should just check your email or something while you're here. So without that burden of that cognitive load of thinking about the other things I could be doing, I'm literally strapped into a seat. I'm not allowed to go anywhere. I can't do anything. That sucks me much deeper into the world of the story, I think, because my whole brain is occupied by the book, not just 90% of it.
I agree. For me, when I'm flying, it's a guilt-free reading time. I'm not thinking about all the jobs that need to be done. So absolutely agree. Just finally, I'm thinking about, the students that I'll go and see later this morning and over the coming weeks. Is there a tip or some sort of motivational quote that you can give them to help them to get that book in their hands?
Here's one thing that that I would like to suggest. One of the limitations of a movie, a TV show, or a video game is that it can only show you how something looks and how it sounds. What it leaves out is how it feels, how it smells, how it tastes. And that's how books transport you into a completely different world. So do yourself a favor, look out for those sensations. And the longer you read, the more you become oblivious to the sensations of your actual surroundings. And I mean, the longer you read in any given session, and the more you get drawn into the sensations of the story. So just enjoy that journey.
Fantastic advice. Thanks for your time, Jack.
Thank you.
Tracey's tip.
I'm sure all of us at some point in time have read books that we just can't get into, but we felt compelled to push through and keep reading. Perhaps it's because it was a heartfelt recommendation from a dear friend, or part of your book club's next read, or it's a book that's had rave reviews and everyone seems to love it. I guess we all have different habits when it comes to the hard-to-get-into book. Some of us can easily stop reading, knowing that there are so many other books we could easily get into. Others of us keep putting it back in the to-be-read pile, collecting dust, waiting for the day when inspiration to read it will strike. And other readers give themselves a number of pages or chapters before they give up on the book altogether. And then there are the readers who, no matter how disinterested they are in the book, will slog through until the end, like a chore that needs to be checked off of a to-do list. I think that as I'm getting older, I've become more reflective about my life as a reader. I'm more attuned to the voice in my head that tells me after a few pages or chapters that this is not the book for me. I love hearing the calculations that people use in deciding when they're going to abandon a book, and the one Jack shared with us was a new one for me. I'm thinking I'd like to give it a try. When I was younger, I thought abandoning a book was a sign of reading weakness, that somehow I didn't have the persistence or grit to see a book through until the end. I was embarrassed about this and never shared this habit with anyone. I guess no one ever shared with me that this is a legitimate reading behaviour. As you would have heard on this podcast time and again, choice about reading material is paramount, and the research definitely supports this. Authors like Penny Kittle, Donald Miller, Kelly Gallagher, Lucy Calkins, Pernille Ripp all agree. We want reading experiences that matter to us, and sometimes this means that we abandon books that we are not connecting with. There have been so many times in my teaching career where students have also felt the pressure to finish a book, no matter how little the book appeals to them. Jack's comments are a timely reminder of how our own habits of abandoning books from time to time can inform our teaching practice. Modelling a range of strategies for gauging how connected we are with a book is so important, as is teaching students when and why to stop reading a book that they aren't into, or a book that is too easy, or too hard, or too scary, or too long. We can be proactive in this space and really work with children on how to pick great books in the first place, lessening the chance that they'll abandon books down the track. Based on a student's previous reading history, we can help them choose new books on the types of characters they connect to, genres they enjoy, and books in a series, for example. It's also important to remember that reading is a social act. Having children work in partnerships or book clubs enables them to discuss the parts of the book that may need more unpacking to understand. As books become more complex, so do the characters, the settings, and the plot. When thinking about abandoning a book, Jack mentioned using the word yet. For example, this isn't the right book yet. This is really helpful advice if we are feeling discouraged by abandoning a book we are reading. Perhaps it's all just a matter of timing. I once heard that books find us when we need them most. Perhaps the books you've discarded in the past may find you in the future, just when you need them the most. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode with our reader in residence, Jack Heath. Our next series of podcasts feature the Children's Book Council of Australia's shortlisted books in the Younger Readers category. These will be a shorter format podcast based around this year's Book Week theme, Reading is My Secret Power.
Writers Read by LiTracey. Getting that book in children's hands. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram @Writers Read by LiTracey, a Dave and the Beanstalk production.